Joining me now for more on President Biden's plans for his first 100 days in office is Ashley Allison. She is the former senior advisor for the Biden transition team. Ashley, great to see you. You worked closely with President Biden during the transition, and now that he is officially president, how have your expectations aligned with reality?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I think that what the president has done in the first week, it hasn't even been a whole week, is tremendous. He signed many executive orders. On the day of his inauguration, he made history by having the first female ever serve as vice president, a woman of color. He is working to unify the country, and really his inauguration speech and the tone of that day has been very clear. He knows, and we all know, there's a lot of work to do because of the failed leadership for the last 4 years. But it feels good. It feels, as an American myself, I feel relieved to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are in charge.
But Ashley, on the question, though, of expectations and reality, there's, of course, always some adjustment. And we've heard from members of the Biden-Harris administration that things, particularly when it comes to coronavirus relief, were actually worse off than you all expected during the transition. So particularly when we're talking about President Biden's repeated claims to promises, rather, to try and get 100 million vaccinations into the arms of 100 million Americans over the next 100 days. Are you still on track to be able to meet that promise?
Well, as it relates to COVID, he made a couple of promises. Yes, around vaccines. And I know that the COVID team is staffing up rapidly to make sure that he can get those vaccines in the arms of Americans. They're talking to governors. They're talking to mayors. What they learned is that all 50 states have a different plan. They were getting no guidance from the federal government. And so as soon as they took office on Wednesday, they started having conversations. President Biden, Jeff Zients, who was the coordinator for COVID, other members of his cabinet and White House staff. Now, other expectations that he made a lot of campaign promises, and he started to make good on them. He sent a bill up to the Hill around immigration. He's reversing executive orders like the Muslim ban and around diversity. So the expectation that Joe Biden will get the campaign promises that he has made done, that can be done by executive order, I feel confident. Now, Congress also has to get to work because they have jobs of passing legislation. He can only do so much as president, but I do think that they have a plan. They rolled one out yesterday around a $1.9 trillion rescue package around COVID, and I think that he has the right team around him to execute the plan.
Actually, I do want to follow up with you about those executive orders and immigration. But while we're on the subject of this nearly $2 trillion plan, I want to ask you, how optimistic are you about getting Republican support, especially when we're starting to hear from so many members real hesitation about other aspects of the plan that they say aren't directly related to COVID relief?
Sure. Well, I think if there's anyone that can get this done in a bipartisan way, it is Joe Biden. People are suffering, and for so long, Republicans dragged their feet during the election cycle, after the election cycle, to let relief be hit the American people, make sure that there's an eviction moratorium, making sure that people get relief checks. This is not some spending spree that Democrats are taking. We are in a crisis like never before, and we hope that we can get to the end of it. But we will need people, Democrats to make some concessions, Republicans to make some concessions. And, tomorrow the White House is having a call with bipartisan senators to have that conversation. It has been so long, I think, when Republicans and Democrats actually even get in a room and talk. So that is encouraging. It's going to be hard work, but I think this team is up for the challenge.
Well, Ashley, as you mentioned, in just 3 days in office, Mr. Biden has issued almost 30 executive orders for more than a dozen actually focused on tackling the pandemic, of course, but several others overturned controversial policies put in place by the previous administration. You mentioned bipartisanship, and I'm wondering about how President Biden and the larger administration are trying to achieve that bipartisanship at the same time that they've been unrolling the actions of the last administration. Does it make the job harder?
Well, many of the actions that the past administration put forth, even Republicans did not support. You know, when I was on the campaign, part of my work was to build the most robust coalition that any president has ever built. And we were able to do that. We built it with young people and elderly Americans. We built it with Black, white, Democrat, and Republicans. That's why over 85 million people voted for Joe Biden. So many really egregious policies like the Muslim ban and family separation, and quite honestly, telling people not to wear a mask when we knew this virus was airborne. People didn't agree with that, Democrat and Republican. Now, some of the packages that he's put forward, so yes, he is rolling back many things that the Trump administration is doing. And then the things that he's putting forward is really refreshing. So he outlined four main crises: COVID, the economy, climate, and racial equity. He has taken action by joining the Paris Accord, which was something that President Obama led our country into. That's not an issue that, you know, climate change doesn't fall on the steps of Democrats and not Republicans. We all suffer from climate change. And so I think that he's taking really great steps, really strategic steps, many things that have been campaign promises, and some like racial equity, the way he's doing the whole of government approach that we just haven't seen before. He is someone who is going to listen to folks, and he has always said he is going to be the president for everyone. And so that means sometimes Democrats won't agree with him, and that means sometimes Republicans won't agree with him. He's going to listen to everyone and then make the call that he thinks is best for this country.
So President Biden has repeatedly discussed how interested he is in bipartisanship, in bringing together the country, as you mentioned, being the president for all Americans. But he's going to need partners on the other side of the aisle to actually make that happen. We do know that the president and Mitch McConnell spent decades together in the Senate, and they're said to have a good relationship. He also, I understand, has a good relationship with Lindsey Graham and some of the other people who were real supporters of President Trump. I'm wondering how much you see President Biden working those relationships to get directly involved in negotiations in a way that former President Trump did not.
Well, I don't really think President Trump tried to work with anyone but himself. So I think it will be different completely what President Trump did and what President Biden is going to do. He will rely on those relationships. And there are people in the Senate now, he said often, that weren't in the Senate when he was there, and he will build new relationships. But one thing that I think is really important is this is not all on the president. The senators, the members of Congress, they are also elected officials. And so for bipartisanship, everyone has to compromise. Republicans cannot be dug in and not willing. They didn't win the Senate, they didn't win the House, and they didn't win the White House. So they're going to need to compromise. And they didn't win because the plan they put forward for Americans, voters did not like. They did not support it. They wanted to get out of the pandemic. They wanted relief. They wanted change. And so they can't be dug in. Democrats, I don't think, will be dug in either. And he will be able to bring folks to the table. You know, they have the Problem Solvers Caucus now, which is something that didn't exist during the Obama administration. And so Joe Biden will get them in the room. He is not afraid to roll up his sleeves, go to work, rely on relationships, but most importantly, rely on the truth and what Americans need.
And if that doesn't work out, filibuster?
Well, I don't know if he's going to take a stance on filibuster. I think the first step is to try and make it work. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversations. Leader Schumer has not taken that off the table either. Let's hope we don't have to get to the point where we have to do rule changes like the Republicans have done so much. But if they need to, I think anything is on the table.
All right. Ashley, Allison, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.